guys, welcome back to my channel. My name's Alice and I love to talk about money, and today we're going to be talking about saving, which is, I feel like it's been a little bit too, how do I say this? Sometimes when people really want to save money, they find a solution that's a little bit too simplified for them. I feel like saving can be a little bit more nuanced than just the classic like automate it, set it and forget it, and someday you'll have the money you need to pay for what you want. I feel like for us, saving has been a little bit more complicated, not more complicated than that, but it's just been a little bit different. So for example, these past couple years, my husband and I have saved for a down payment on a house, which was about $40,000 to $50,000. We have saved for a yard and a fence, which was $20,000, and we made our first emergency fund, which was $12,000. So we did that all in the course of a couple years. We did not at all use the automate it, set and forget method because I just felt like it wasn't really how it worked with our money psychology and our money narratives. And when I looked at like, why didn't we use automation? Because we use automation for our investments. It works totally fine. We literally set it and forget it. Sometimes I forget how much we're even investing because we just set it and I don't remember, and it doesn't take any mental energy. But for saving, I feel like it's a lot different for us, especially because everything that we save for has a different money psychology. Saving for your first house is different than saving for your emergency fund, which is different than saving every year for Christmas. So I just felt like there were different strategies that needed to be employed for each type of saving that you're trying to do. This video is going to go over different things that you can save for, or just how to become a saver with specific strategies for what you're saving for. So the 4 strategies are a big purchase, emergency fund, sinking funds, and learning how to just live below your means and not live paycheck to paycheck anymore. So if you're interested in one or more of those things, I'll put the timestamps up here or down on the timeline and you can find exactly what you're looking for. Okay, yay, I love talking about saving money. I have my laptop here with some notes written down about how we were able to save for everything that we did and some strategies I've seen other people employ that works for them and some strategies that have definitely worked for us. So let's get into this. I feel like the first step that most people really do miss is you have to find out what you're saving for, and not only what you're saving for, but what is your timeline? How hard and fast is that timeline deadline? And what are you gonna spend it on? So for example, a big purchase like saving up for a house or a car, you know without a doubt that you're going to use that money and you're going to put it down within a certain amount of time. Now for an emergency fund, it's a little bit different. You're saving this money, and it's also hard with an emergency fund because you don't always know exactly when the emergency fund is done. That is where the money psychology comes in, where it's not always like, okay, I know we'll be done when we save $50,000. It'll be like, I don't know, is $12,000 enough? Or our expenses just went up, so we need to save more. It definitely has a different money psychology than something else. So you have to figure out kind of what your feelings are towards that, where your feelings are towards even spending the money. Like say you're saving up a lot of money to pay for something that you don't necessarily want, like a health procedure. That wasn't a good example because you'll probably want that, but something that you're like begrudgingly saving for will feel different than saving up for like a really expensive purse or a fun vacation. So you kind of have to do a little bit of self-reflection and see how you feel about it, because that'll come to play with how you're going to support yourself when you're saving for that. So it might be more fun to save for a vacation than save for something that you don't actually want to purchase. Okay, yes, let's start off with big purchases. So saving for big purchases can definitely be a huge mind game, I feel like, especially if you have to save really, really fast. So saving for a big purchase does have its pros and cons. A pro is that you do know when that saving is done, and you'll have that like really big satisfaction that you saved $20 or $30 or $40,000, and you know that it's going to come to an end someday. Saving for a big purchase, like slashing all your expenses and trying to make more money, it doesn't feel too bad if you know it'll only last 6 or 8 or 12 months. The flip side is that it can feel so overwhelming saving for a big purchase sometimes. If you think, I've never saved $40,000 in my entire life, the fact that I have to do that right now can be super overwhelming. So there are pros and cons of saving for a big purchase mentally, but let's get into some strategies on how to save for big purchases. So I'm going to draw a lot on my personal experience because our biggest purchase, we put, I think, $45,000 down on our house, and then we had like $5,000 for closing and other stuff. There's like a lot of fees when you buy a house that we had no idea about, but anyways, it happened. And it really depends on how long you have to save for your house. Say you're like, oh, I want a house in 5 years. We can start saving casually. But for us, we decided we're going to buy a house, and we put our earnest money down in April. And then we had to move in October because it was being built. So that is about 6 months of saving. So we knew that we needed to take extreme measures in order to save an extremely high amount of money in an extremely short amount of time. So if you have a lot of time, you can definitely be more relaxed and loose about this. But if you're in a real time crunch, then you have to do a little bit more of extreme things, but it won't last forever. So that's a good thing. So for us, we moved in with our in-laws. So we cut our expenses. We only let ourselves spend $600 a month, and that included gas and insurance, any food that we wanted to eat, anything fun that we want to do, anytime we hung out with friends. You can cut a lot of expenses in your fun by finding out free ways to have fun, and I feel like that's the best way to sustain a budget, because if you just slash all fun and joy and happiness in your life, you're going to hit your budget someday. You're going to resent it, and it's not going to last forever. So when we would be invited to go out to lunch or go out to dinner with our friends, we would just like split a meal, or we would just be like, okay, this is the one time we can do it. The next time we hang out with friends, we need to do something else. We also, so we moved in with our in-laws, and we decided, my husband had a car and I had a car. My car did not have a car payment on it, and my husband's did. So we decided to give it back to his parents. So we only had one car, and that saved us so much money, because a car payment and just all the upkeep with having a car is kind of a big deal, and it can really drain your budget, especially when you're trying to save a lot of money and cut back expenses. So I decided to have my husband use my car, and I use public transportation to get to school, and that was a huge money saver for us. Okay, besides cutting expenses, which you can only do so much of, we also increased our income during these 6 months. Or more for the 4 months. So we are only spending $600 that each month. To increase our income, we decided to pick up extra odd jobs. So I got a retail job. I worked at the Loft. I don't know if you know what that is. It was super chill because not very many people shop there anymore. So I really enjoyed it. And it only paid about $14 an hour. So it wasn't a huge moneymaker. But if I could make a couple $100, that would be able to cover a lot of that $600 that we spent each month, so that we could put more money towards savings. And my husband decided to do yard work and odds and ends jobs for his grandma to get paid a little bit more money, so that we could just put literally every dime that we had towards saving for our house. So if you have cut expenses as much as you can for a certain amount of time, it's not always sustainable, but if you can do it for 6 to 8, 12 months, that's really great. And then also increasing your income. Now that is not always super sustainable for a long period of time too. I was working like 60 hours a week, and I know for my life that's not what I want, and that's not sustainable. I have things that I want to do. I would not be able to work 60 hours a week and be the person that I want to be, but I knew that it was just for a short period of time, so I could sacrifice for that time to get a house. And right now we are saving for another big purchase, and that is a car, and we don't know quite how much a car is going to be. We're thinking about $30,000 to $40,000, but our strategy for this is different than saving for a house. We're not going to sell our house and moving with our in-laws. We decided that in order to save for our car, we are going to budget so that the first part of the month we only think about saving, and then the second part of the month we think about expenses. So we're saving money first, and then we're thinking about our expenses. Now obviously you can't be like, I'm going to save money and not pay my rent or not pay my mortgage, but what we're doing is we are saving first, so that when the end of the month rolls around, we look at our bank accounts and we're like, well, we don't actually have the money to splurge and overspend a little bit because we already put all of our money into savings. So it's applying a little bit more pressure to our guilt-free spending and our expenses, and prioritizing our saving, which again, we'll only be doing for about a year. So we feel like it's more sustainable. And this one isn't too extreme as well. We don't feel like we're missing out on anything. We just have to be a little bit more conscientious of the money that we have in our bank account. Okay, you guys, so that is how we are saving / how we saved for our biggest purchases that we have made so far. I hope those tips really help you guys. I know saving for a huge purchase can be super overwhelming. We also don't always have the muscle to save for big purchases. I feel like in our world right now, you kind of just look at what the monthly cost is going to be for something, or you look at how you can finance it or what the interest rate is going to be. But I know that it is really important to save for huge purchases, and it might feel like maybe you even came from a family that has only ever financed and leased cars, and you're like, is it even possible to buy a car in cash? That can be hard to do it for the very first time, but if you keep exercising this muscle of being like, no, I'm going to save for a big purchase instead of finance it, it can really change the trajectory of your financial life, because these huge purchases they're more important than those little tiny like $3 purchases. As Ramit Sethi says, like, these are the ones that are going to make a big difference, not the ones that are like really small that add like a little bit of joy to your life. You shouldn't have to take those ones away. You should be caring more about the big expenses. Now we're going to talk about emergency fund, and I think an emergency fund is such a worthwhile endeavor. An emergency fund has completely taken away the stress of finances for me. Personally, if we have a month where it's like, wow, we overspent by a couple $100 or something came up, I don't feel any stress to be like, oh my gosh, we can't pay for this. Like, that's crazy. We don't have to turn to credit cards or anything. having an emergency fund gives you such peace of mind, especially for my husband and I right now while we're in school and we have a mortgage. Things are they're not like necessarily tight per se. I wouldn't say that we live a very like glamorous, like we're not spending a ton of money all the time. Like some people, the idea of spending $1,000 a month on fun is definitely not something that we're thinking about right now, and not like a muscle that we've exercised. So if for you, your baseline is $1,000 a month on whatever you want, we're definitely not doing that. So it might seem a little bit tighter to you. But currently for us, I do know things are like quote unquote a little bit tighter because we are in college and I'm working part-time. My husband is still in school. So we have a couple raises and bonuses coming up. But for right now, just having a closer margin, having higher fixed costs and lower income, not actually low income, but like margin wise, ratio wise, it's definitely not like our housing expenses are way more than 25% of our take home pay. So for us, having an emergency fund definitely lowers the risk of our situation. Also, having two people working definitely lowers the risk because if one person gets fired, you don't have to pay $1,000 a month for health insurance. I know Caleb Hammer on the financial audit says not having an emergency fund is an emergency. I think having an emergency fund, it will change your financial life. It will change your financial piece for sure. Or it's one of those stepping stones to really get to that abundance mindset, because it's true, you do have enough. There's different strategies when it comes to saving for an emergency fund based on if you're starting from level like $0 or if you already have one and you're increasing it, like me and my husband. So we did actually, this is crazy. We moved into our house and we had no emergency fund, which is wild. We saved up all our money for 6 months, like I was talking about in the previous section, and we moved in. And I think we had a couple $1,000s, but when you move in, there's like so many things you have to buy. Like we hadn't been buying groceries for 6 months when we were living with our in-laws, so we had to completely stock our fridge and pantry. We had to just buy all these things basically to live in our house, and that was actually kind of stressful. So when we were starting from literally $0, we just hit the ground running with our emergency fund, and that was all we thought about. And now we're at the point where we're trying to increase our emergency fund because we know over time our life is going to get more expensive, and the more expensive our life gets, the higher our expenses get. Having kids, getting more assets, we just want to be able to protect ourselves a little bit more and lower our risk. So we are trying to increase it right now to $18,000. And I know moving into a house without an emergency fund, I definitely do not think that's a good idea. It worked out for us. We also have a bit of a safety net. Just we have some familial support when it comes to that. I don't think anyone would ever let us be, without a house. We'd always have a place to move back to if things really, really went poorly. But again, I want to be independent. I want us to be able to be self-sufficient. And so we don't want to have to ask for help. And we haven't had to ask for help, which is awesome. So I really feel sad when I see people on LinkedIn and they have just gotten divorced or they have like a big medical emergency or something. And I feel really sad when they don't have any family to lean on. So I'm really grateful for that situation. I'm really grateful for that aspect in our situation, but I know that that's not how it is for everyone. So it is really important to have an emergency fund. So here are my top tips for saving when you have a $0 emergency fund currently. I would say, when it comes to saving for a big purchase, say you decide to pack your lunch instead of buy a lunch and it saves you $10. Saving that $10 for your down payment or your $40,000 car isn't going to really move the needle and make that big of a difference. When it comes to an emergency fund, especially when you don't have one at all, anything helps, because being $10 over your budget versus being $10 under your budget when you don't have an emergency fund makes all the difference. So putting that $10 towards your emergency fund, I feel like can move the needle in the sense that you realize how dire the situation is and how intense you need to be attacking this and going for your emergency fund. I know it's so unfortunate. I feel like some people like to have meticulous budgets and other people don't. But when you don't have an emergency, it is kind of an emergency in itself, as Caleb Hammer says. So I would keep a very meticulous budget, and I would be tracking each budget line and seeing how much you can spend under that budget, and then taking that money and moving it to savings, and just keeping a really good pulse on your bank account and your budget, because really all that money helps when it comes to an emergency. Even like say you're only able to spend $10, like save $10 here and $20 here and put it into your emergency fund. If you have a $75 emergency and you have that $75 in your emergency fund, like that can make a huge difference when it comes to making sure you don't turn to credit cards and getting into debt. So anything really helps when it comes to this, and keeping a meticulous budget I feel like is the best way to grow your emergency fund from $0 if you have really, really tight margins. And then if you don't have an emergency fund, this is one of those times where you need to really buckle down and live a super lean life that might not be sustainable forever, but can be sustainable for 6 to 12 months. So the biggest way I feel like you can sustain a really intense, lean lifestyle for a period of time is to find free, fun things to do. If you were to be like, I'm going to save for my emergency fund, so I'm not going to feel any joy for the next 12 months, like, I don't think that's possible. The best way to sustain a really intense budget is to still have an amazing life without spending any money. So I wrote down some tips for how we were able to have really free fun when we were saving for emergency fund and saving for our house. So we would do, okay, this is actually my favorite thing, is doing a candlelit dinner. So whether you're eating pizza or pasta, hamburgers or whatever, we just take one of these candles. We just take one of these bad boys, because a candlestick is literally $2. Just lighting a candlestick and being like, this is our date night. It's our normal dinner, but we're lighting a candle. That is a super like, yeah, cheap way to have fun and sustain your budget and not feel like you're missing out on life because you can't go on any dates or anything. Another thing is having movie nights with friends. Also, when your friends want to get together and they're like, let's get dinner, you should be like, let's get dessert. I'll eat dinner before, because dessert is always cheaper than dinner. Like, say dinner's $20, but dessert can be like, especially if you like go out for ice cream or something, it'd be like $5. So I feel like just kind of changing your mindset, and also just like coming to your friends and be like, hey guys, we're really trying to save money right now, or I'm really trying to save money right now. Would you mind if we go out to dessert instead of dinner? And I think your friends would respect you more just being like honest and be like, hey, I'm trying to save. Saving is a worthy endeavor. And if they're like, no, like that might not be good. So, and then obviously a couple outdoor things if the weather permits: stargazing, going on a hike, going on a picnic. That's again taking the food you're already going to make and just eating it outside. And my all-time favorite, going to the library. I'm obsessed with it. Going to bookstores is so fun, but someone tell me why a book is like $30. I definitely love going to the library, and that is super fun, and you can like make a little day out of it for sure. And then I feel like things change a lot when you have a good emergency fund, but then you just want to increase it. So that's what we're at right now. We have a $12,000 emergency fund. We feel pretty good about that, but we definitely know that we want it to increase. Increasing your emergency fund is so much lower pressure than starting from like level 0. For this, we are just taking the approach of every time we move money into savings, we're just being like, okay, $200 of our savings that we're already moving into savings goes to our emergency fund. Like, it's just such a small amount, but we're just doing a few $100s that here or there, and we are hoping that again add up over time. That's less of like an emergency, like we need it, intense, code red. That's just like more chill. We're just going to move money over time, and it's just triggered by the fact that we do move money over to savings every month. And so when we do, we're just gonna like, hey, a couple $100s into our emergency fund. And then another tip that we are doing right now is we have a budget line in our budget spreadsheet that reminds us to save for emergency fund. We just talk about it every time I make our budget spreadsheet, like how much do we want to save, and it's always usually a little bit of a lower number. I feel like increasing your emergency fund is just a matter of reminding yourself to do it. And I think in this section, automation really could actually be used for emergency fund. And now that I'm thinking about it, that might not be bad. I actually really like that. I think I'm going back on my whole automation rampage. I've been talking a lot. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about is how to save for sinking funds. If you are unfamiliar with sinking funds are treated differently by everyone just a little bit. They're really customizable saving opportunities to be able to buy things that you want. Generally, they are a little bit more fun, or they're a little bit more proactive in like if something bad happens in a very specific category like health or dentistry or car, you can put that money towards a sinking fund. And then if you need that, like regular maintenance on your car, like oil changes, or if you know you need to go to the dentist every 6 months, you can just draw it out from that sinking fund. Now, sinking funds also have the potential to be super fun. So you can have a vacation sinking fund, a wedding sinking fund, birthdays, Christmas. So I really love sinking funds. I feel like they're a great way to make money really happy and reduce financial stress. I feel like there's some money things that we do in order to avoid a lot of pain, and some money strategies we do to bring happiness into our life. And this is definitely one of the more positive ones. This is like paying off debt is happy in the long run, but it might not be fun while you're doing it. But putting money into a sinking fund, that especially a small one, can be a really fast way to feel high satisfaction in your money. For me, I've definitely noticed we've never saved up for Christmas before, and this is the first year that we did it by just putting a little bit of money, or actually for our Christmas fund, I think this year we just used our interest off of our high yield savings account because interest rates were so high for everything. High yield savings accounts rates were really high, and so we were able to put our emergency fund in a high yield savings account and then use that interest to pay for Christmas, / also using some of our like year-end bonuses for Christmas. So it made buying presents for Christmas so completely fun. It was like, oh, I have all this money. Like, what am I gonna buy like my husband or my mom or my brother and sisters? Like, and it's more exciting because I already have the money and you don't have to stress about it. An important part of sinking funds is that they're different than an emergency fund, because a sinking fund, you know that you're gonna spend that money. An emergency fund, I feel like you kind of have a list of rules or a list of best practices for when you are going to end up spending that. Like an emergency fund, you might be like, I'm only going to use this for expenses that I know I have to pay for. But then a sinking fund, like for beauty, could be like, oh, I know Sephora is going to have a sale on Black Friday. Like, I'm going to save up a lot of money for that, and I'm going to have fun on that sale. So I just think it takes money spending opportunities, it completely takes the stress away and makes it so much more fun. Like buying Christmas presents, buying things on Black Friday, buying things for your birthday, having a good anniversary. So I think there's a lot of different sinking funds depending on when you know you want to spend them, or if they're just indefinite, or how big they're going to be, or how small. So I think that sinking funds are a great thing to do, and I think they're this awesome stepping stone towards using money to create meaning in your life instead of just like avoid pain and fear, if that makes sense. Some common sinking funds I feel like I've heard a lot about, definitely Christmas is a huge one, and then there's beauty, clothes, fun, furniture, like seasonal activities like skiing or snowboarding, and they're not that expensive, but they're things that you can't really pay for. Like say there's a Black Friday sale, or you know that like ski passes go on sale a certain time of year and it's like $500. $500 isn't like a huge amount in the grand scheme of things, but it's not something you can generally just pay for out of your paycheck each month. So it's good to save up for so you don't feel that financial stress. Here are my top saving tips for smaller to medium-sized sinking funds. Tip number 1 is that you can definitely do the meticulous budget again and put all your money that you don't spend in each budget line over to your sinking fund. So my husband and I have definitely talked about doing this recently. We have been living in our house for a year and a half now, and there's just some furniture items that we definitely don't have. Like we don't have nightstands, which is kind of big. A lot of our stuff is on the ground. So yeah, a couple furniture things that we definitely want to have in the near future. But they're not that expensive. Like in the grand scheme of things, like a few $100s for nightstands is not too bad. That's not, $35,000 for a car. We've talked about moving just some of the extra money into that savings fund so that we can buy some furniture. Okay, another thing that I've done that I thought was super fun was when we were saving for our anniversary one year, and I knew our anniversary was going to be a couple $100s because we were going to go out to a nice dinner. I decided every time that I went grocery shopping that I was just going to pull out money, like cash, from when it says like, do you want cash back at the register? And I just put that in a little cute like adventure fund, and it was actually super fun. It was a really great way to save money, and obviously your grocery budget might be a little bit too hard to take it out from your grocery budget, but you could always do it for something else. Groceries for me worked best because our grocery budget, we're pretty good at keeping it down. So every time I went grocery shopping 2 or 3 times a month, I'd take out $10 to $20, and over time that definitely adds up, especially if your sinking fund's only like $100 to $200. And then yes, again, for our Christmas, we just put our $12,000 emergency fund into a high yield savings account and use that interest to pay for Christmas. Okay, and then for a bigger sinking fund, the only real bigger sinking fund that I have had experience with is that we saved for a trip to Italy. We started saving for a trip in, let me think, maybe October to January. So we were able to save pretty fast. We were able to save up to $10,000. And we did this by putting our bonuses and all Christmas money. So kind of just extra money. There's sometimes, I know you might not feel lucky or like, oh, I never get extra money. And that can be really hard. But when you do come across extra money, it's really good to make a rule like 50% goes into savings and 50% I get to spend on whatever I want. So that's kind of what we did with our Italy sinking fund, especially because there's a hard and fast deadline, because we had bought the plane tickets and we need to save for the rest of the vacations. It definitely was good for us to be like, oh, when we get our bonus, we're going to put some of that money towards Italy. When we get Christmas money, we're going to put some of that money towards Italy. That was really great, and we were able to save pretty fast for Italy. But I hope that you guys can definitely employ sinking funds. They turn times when you're already going to spend money into really exciting times where you can treat yourself and treat others and have a stress-free vacation and celebration, anniversary, Christmas, all that. All right, so those were sinking funds, and now we're going to talk about just like general, how do you not live paycheck to paycheck, or how do you live when your expenses are really high, or how do you get out of that vicious cycle of you're just living and you feel like you're not able to save at all. Basically, how to become a person who can save money. And that is definitely a skill for sure. I feel like over time you realize like, oh, I'm not saving any money, or oh, lifestyle creep really got to me. There's some things that I've noticed where it's like, I feel like I can't live without this, but I know for the first 20 years of my life, I did live without this. It definitely is interesting to have a budget and check it and be like, that's interesting that every single month, ever since like 6 months ago, we decided we're going to pay for that for the rest of our life. So saving money can definitely be very tricky, and just being a person who can save is really hard. I do want to preface this with saying like, it's okay if you haven't been able to save money. You're not a bad person if you have debt or anything. Like, there is so much more to money than just like those who can save and those who can't. Like, it's like cultural and familial. There's so many factors, your past, your relationships, like all these things have to do with saving and spending money and being in debt. And that can be really hard, but I hope that I can give you guys some tips on how to live and find peace when you have higher fixed expenses or you're living paycheck to paycheck. Also, definitely check out my video right here. I talked about how for a brief moment in time, we did have 83% fixed expenses because our income went way down and our expenses went way up. And it was like really stressful, but I found some ways that really lowered our financial stress and increased like that abundance mindset to be like, we're going to be okay. We're going to make it. We do have to change our lifestyle a little bit. Right now, we'll talk about kind of getting out of that paycheck to paycheck cycle. So here are my best tips for not living paycheck to paycheck anymore, or how to deal with having really high fixed expenses. The number one way that I find that people spend a lot of money, or maybe they could be saving a lot of money in that category, is groceries. So groceries, I know we have all heard like inflation ruined grocery shopping and groceries will never be cheap again, and like groceries are way too much now. I can't believe that groceries increase so much in price. As Ramit Sadie says, like everyone basically buys the same loaf of bread, but if you are living paycheck to paycheck, it's way harder on you to have groceries increase than if you're really wealthy. So I really do feel bad that this increase in groceries basically only impacted people who are struggling, and also it did impact like food businesses too. So yeah, it was really hard for a lot of people. But I do know that a lot of people can save money when it comes to grocery shopping. So me and my husband, we spend about $400 a month on groceries. And there are a lot of things that we do to make sure to keep that down. The number one thing is we absolutely do not shop at Costco. Costco, I know. It's amazing. It's beautiful. You walk in and it's like you hear the angels singing to you. It's so great. Costco is so expensive. It is so expensive because the food is so nice. I feel like Costco is the perfect place for people who already want to buy nice food. They just want to buy it at a little bit cheaper of a discount, at a little bit cheaper of a price than they would normally if they're going to Walmart or Target to buy food. You have to buy a lot and you have to buy really nice food. My husband and I, we shop at Winco, which is a complete budget grocery store. Like, you have to bag your own food and everything because that helps them keep prices down. It also does have bulk food where you have to like do the container like this and get a certain amount and like tie it and stuff and write the little number on it, because then you can buy exactly what you want. And the food is just not as nice. And it doesn't mean like the almonds are not as good for you as they are at Costco. It just means that the brand image, like you don't eat an almond and feel like amazing like you would if the brand for that almond company was like so bougie and nice, you know? So it really is just like, you just don't feel as amazing when you eat this stuff because it's just like, you don't have that psychology of marketing when it comes to it. So that really greatly lowers the price of the food. And then also, we do not just make a grocery list when we go shopping. We plan our meals, and obviously sometimes we plan our meals less efficiently or less effectively than other times. But what I do is I go into the HelloFresh website. I do not order HelloFresh because that is so expensive. I go into the HelloFresh website, I find the meals that I want, I scroll down to the ingredients, and I pick exactly what is on there. I say, okay, we have this, we don't have this, we don't have all these things. How long is it going to take to make so it fits our schedule? And then I put the food that we don't have on the grocery list. And then I put the food like recipe link into notes so that when we're like, what are we going to make tonight? We have exactly what we want to eat. So that way we're eating all the food that we buy and we're not buying anything that we already have. And we're able to make the most of our grocery shopping. You guys know when you go grocery shopping and then you come home and you're like, I still feel like we don't have any food and we can't really make any meal, or we don't have any breakfast food. This is a great way to make sure that you are buying food that you're actually going to eat, and it helps you like emotionally and mentally feel like you have enough food at home. So that is my recommendation for absolutely slashing your grocery budget. Honestly, it works super well. Another thing, like a big thing about lowering your grocery budget, is you have to be okay with eating leftovers. When we make food or we make dinner, we're making dinner for like a family of 4 or a family of 6. Like we're making a lot, and then we eat that for the next 1 or 2 days for lunch, and we're able to make bigger batches of it and not have to go to work and go to school and buy lunch. So another maybe seemingly counterintuitive way to help you kind of get out of the cycle of living paycheck to paycheck, or kind of bring financial peace to you when you are living with such high fixed expenses, is to have an unexpected / miscellaneous line in your budget. If you do zero-based budgeting, which I know a lot of us do, and it's awesome, I really like it. It has its pros and cons, but if you do zero-based budgeting and you do not have a line that is a few $100s that says miscellaneous, you will not be able to get out of the cycle. Or I don't want to say you won't be able to, but it might be hard, or you might feel really stressed. For us, we have this miscellaneous and unexpected budget line, and right now it's $350 a month. I know when we first got into our house, we're like, let's try 200. 200 was not enough. We needed about 300, 350. Sometimes if we know the month is going to be super expensive, we do like 400. We have this budget line, and it actually helps us to feel more financial peace and like be okay with our fixed expenses being higher, because we know that if something comes up, we can pay for it. And we don't have to ask family, and we don't have to go to credit cards. We always know that we can pay them off. So, and if you do have this miscellaneous amount or unexpected budget, like line in your budget, if you don't use that up, then you can move it over to your savings, and that can start building your emergency fund or helping you learn just how to be someone who can save. It's definitely worth a try if you have really high fixed expenses, or you feel like you're living paycheck to paycheck. Another thing to definitely work towards when you are living in a more tight financial environment is to work towards having a buffer in your bank account. So for us, we want to keep $800 to $1,000 in our bank account at all times, because when we move all of our money over to savings and our mortgage comes out of our bank account, we're left with like, $800, $700, $1,000 in our bank account. And that helps us feel a lot of financial peace and not have to deal with overdraft fees or anything, because we know that when we do use our debit card or our bills come out that can't come out on our credit card, that we have the money to pay for that, and we're never like getting so close to zero and worrying that we can't pay for something. So definitely working towards that. I feel like working toward an emergency fund when you're living paycheck to paycheck. And then also it's a huge milestone to be able to even have a buffer in your bank account. That's like the foundation, I feel like, of not having to live paycheck to paycheck anymore, is using your card and knowing that you have the money in it. It just also depends on your expenses. For us, we found that $1,000, somewhere around there, amazing. For other people, they need more peace of mind, and so they might be doing like $5,000, which is kind of a lot. I'd be worried about that being like getting hacked or fraud and being that taken out. But I know if like someone hacks our bank account and it's only $800, like I would cry. I definitely would cry. Money is still really emotional to me, and I think it might be emotional forever. But I'd feel much better about $800 than like $10,000. So just find what works for you. And if that starts with like, a buffer of $400 a month, and you always have $400 a month, like that's still really great. Applaud yourself for these little milestones, and someday you'll look back and you'll be like, I didn't even know I could get here. That's amazing. So a buffer in your bank account is definitely a great way to have financial peace. It can be a stepping stone towards savings, because you're not having to turn toward credit cards. And then I want to end by saying my last tip for having really high fixed expenses or living paycheck to paycheck is to find free ways to have fun when you're living paycheck to paycheck, in order to sustain that lifestyle and really stay strong and not turn towards credit cards or loans, is to find those free ways to have fun. Now, I feel like it used to be harder to find these ways, but now with AI, generative AI, you can find ways to have fun. You can type in the location, like where you live, what the climate is, what season it is, what things you like to do, what things you dislike to do. If you have friends you can do things with, or if you want to do things independently, you can put all that into AI, into ChatGPT, and it can help you find free ways to have fun so that you can stop living paycheck to paycheck, especially because if you feel like you have to spend money in order to have fun, when you do get that increase in your salary or your income, you're going to be like, well, I want to have fun, so I have to spend money to do it. But if you can either cut money out of your budget by finding free or cheaper ways to have fun, then you're going to be able to free up that money. And when you're living paycheck to paycheck, or you have super high fixed expenses, a super high fixed expense ratio, like anything helps when you're learning how to save money, creating that buffer in your bank account, creating your first emergency fund, and just learning how to be someone who can save. Oh my gosh, you guys, thank you so much for watching. If you're still here at the end of the video, like, I love you so much. Like, that's insane. but I'm super excited just to be on YouTube, and I love this so much. Thank you guys so much for watching my videos. If you have any other savings tips, please drop them in the comments below. I'm always looking for different ways to save. I also feel like it'd help out a lot of other people who maybe have different saving experiences. I know for me, I haven't had, like, there's some things I haven't had to save for and other things I have had to save for, and maybe you relate to them on varying levels. Don't forget to subscribe so you can be the first to know about these videos, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.